man's value, then you better properly understand the context of what he's doing in the location, which is the Cleveland Browns. That's my 2 cents on Baker Mayfield and how little he has been valued. I got to bring in NFL analyst Bucky Brooks to ask you, Bucky, is Baker Mayfield undervalued in Cleveland?
I cannot believe we're even using the term undervalued. Like, I'm trying to figure out what exactly are we trying to say that he is doing that makes him undervalued and maybe even underappreciated. Because when I look at Baker Mayfield, here's what I see. I see a guy who has a 23-22 record, which is right at 500, which is average. I'm seeing a guy who's completing 61% of his passes, which is average. His passer rating is right in the mid 89, 90 range. What exactly are we talking about? He is an average quarterback doing average things. And so how can we say he's undervalued? He actually is probably maybe a little overrated in terms of what we may be having to pay him in the coming months based on an extension. So is he undervalued? Absolutely not. He's an average quarterback paying for a team that has been a little better than average. So he's right at about the right spot for where I rate him and where he should be compensated if we think about long-term values and compensation.
Okay, Bucky Brooks, that's not a surprising take from you at all. But I got to bring in my brother Sam Acho to ask you the same question. Is Baker Mayfield undervalued in Cleveland?
No, he's not. Emmanuel, I love your monologue. I also love all of your opening monologues. It's been cool to see you do it live and in the flesh. I respect it. I appreciate it. But you got me on this show, so I got to talk to you some real. Value is not based on location. Value is based on perception. And so if there's a perceived value, you say, okay, well, I would pay X amount for this watch. I think it's worth $500,000. I'll pay $500,000 because it's a Rolex or whatever, right? But there's a perception, but then there's reality. The perception in Cleveland is that Baker is the guy. Let's not forget, Cleveland turned down trade offers from Green Bay. They said, we want Baker. So Andrew Berry said, Baker is our guy. Kevin Stefanski said, Baker is our guy. Cleveland Nation, the dog pound, go on Twitter, go on Instagram, go anywhere. They're like, man, get off of us. We have our guy. And so value is not based on location. Value is based on perception. And the perception of Baker in Cleveland is that he is the guy and he's not going anywhere.
Well, then we're almost saying the same thing using different words. When I think about Baker Mayfield, this is what people don't understand. You should understand it better than anybody I talk to because of our similar upbringings. We went to a prestigious private school, for those that don't know, St. Mark's School of Texas, literally the #1 school in Dallas, Texas. Google it. You can fact check me. And with that being said, I wasn't really all that smart in high school. Had a 2.8 my freshman year, a 3.0 my sophomore year, a 3.2 my junior year, a 3.4 my senior year. It comes out to about a 3.1 or a 3.2. I wasn't all that smart. But then I got to college. All of a sudden, I was a genius. Because in that environment, amongst other geniuses, you aren't valued educationally as much because of where the bar is. Now, had I been somewhere else, I would have actually properly been able to perceive my intelligence perspective to what has come prior to me. It's the same thing with Baker Mayfield. It's the same thing I'm trying to tell you. It's the same thing, Bucky, I'm trying to tell you. You all have to put in the proper context of who Baker Mayfield is. You'll never hear me say that Baker Mayfield is a franchise quarterback. You'll only hear me say that Baker Mayfield is the franchise quarterback because Baker Mayfield is the franchise quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if he's a franchise quarterback. I don't know how he would do in Kansas City. I don't know how he would do in Tampa, in Dallas, in San Diego, or in Los Angeles, excuse me. But I know this Bucky Brooks because I walked the halls of 76 Lou Groza Boulevard, Berea, Ohio, 44017 area code. I know it, Bucky Brooks, because I walked the halls. It's hard to win in Cleveland, big dog. And so y'all have to use the proper context when assessing Baker Mayfield and Baker Mayfield's value. You all are trying to compare Baker Mayfield to Patrick Mahomes, who walked into a Kansas City Chiefs locker room that was already 12-4. Congratulations. You took them 12-4, and then you took them to the Super Bowl. They was 12-4 before you got there. Y'all are trying to assess Baker Mayfield in comparison to how you might look at a Matthew Stafford this year. Congratulations. The Rams went to the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 years and went to a Super Bowl 2 years ago. So Matthew Stafford, I hope you take them back to the playoffs. Look at Baker Mayfield in regards to history. He showed up 1-31 head coach. He showed up a head coach who had only been an OC for 8 games. And just like that, Baker takes him to the playoffs and wins the playoff game for the first time since 1994. You all please properly understand the context of Baker Mayfield's greatness.
Okay, since you're a great Texan, I'm going to try and give you context. So my context in Baker Mayfield is he's the number one overall pick. And so if we were doing this on fast food chains, when you're the number one overall pick, I expect you to be one of the best. So I would expect him to be McDonald's. But you being from Texas, he's Whataburger. So he's Whataburger. So locally, he's a big deal for you. But on a national scope, I don't really understand what the fascination is about Whataburger when I've had McDonald's. It is very, I guess, comparable to being a Californian talking about In-N-Out. The regional flavor, you love it, but on a national scope, it doesn't really register the same as a McDonald's would. And so maybe it's my fault for saying that Baker Mayfield came in the league, the number one overall pick. He's supposed to be a national brand. I want him to be a franchise quarterback. So I want him to be McDonald's. But Acho, you're settling for Whataburger because locally that's a big deal, but we want more. I want more.
I hear you, Bucky Brooks. I see my dog's well-traveled. He brought up Whataburger, brought up In-N-Out. I see you, Bucky Brooks. But let me remind you all both of this. Tim Couch couldn't pull the Cleveland Browns up. Tim Couch, number one overall pick. Brandon Weeden was a dude at Oklahoma State. And Brandon Weeden came into the league at 28. So it wasn't like a lack of maturation. He couldn't pull the Browns up. I didn't even mention my guy. Man who I was an usher in his wedding, Colt McCoy, two-time Heisman finalist. He couldn't pull the Browns up. Johnny Manziel, he had backings from Drake and LeBron James. He couldn't pull the Browns up. Oh, who else I didn't mention, Bucky? Robert Griffin. You know the Heisman winner, Robert Griffin, went to Cleveland in his physical prime at the age of 27. Cleveland dismantled Robert Griffin so much so that he had to retire the next year. Robert Griffin didn't play in the 2017 season, for those of y'all that are trying to figure it out. So imagine what Cleveland Brown does to quarterbacks. They do quarterbacks dirty, but Baker Mayfield steps into Cleveland, takes them to the playoffs, wins 11 games, first-year head coach. I'm just saying, Bucky, maybe he's Whataburger, maybe he's In-N-Out, but get this, when people come into Texas, they don't ask for McDonald's. They say, hey, big dog, where the nearest Whataburger? When people go to Cali, they don't ask for McDonald's. They say, hey, big dog, can you take me to an In-N-Out? You got to understand, Cleveland, they just asking for Baker Mayfield.
That's such a low bar that we're using. But let's do it this way, because I think yesterday you gave me a lecture or tutorial on inverse relationships, where the more something goes up, others go down. So I noticed when I look at Baker Mayfield, because we're saying last year was a great year for the Cleveland Browns, and it was. They were 11-5. But I also noticed he averaged 30 pass attempts per game because he's supported by the number 3 ranked rush offense in football. I also noticed that we judge our quarterbacks and their ability in the fourth quarter to really make it happen. I noticed in Baker Mayfield's career, he only has 7 game-winning drives. Only 2 of those occurred last year. So what I know from Baker Mayfield is he's a front runner. If we give him the lead, he can hold on. But he ain't bringing us back in a track meet. He can't be the anchor leg that gets it behind, because whatever you give it to him, that's where he stands. So if you want a guy that can just kind of drive the boat but not give you anything more, that's Baker Mayfield. But if you want a luxurious automobile, a luxurious vehicle that you can get in, someone that can take you to higher heights, Baker Mayfield can't do. He can't give that. So my value is wanting something that can give me more, not something that just gives me what I always have. I want more for Cleveland.
Bucky,
that's all. I just want more.
Bucky, you legitimately confuse me. You really do. Because you talk about, no, really, check me out. Because you talk about luxurious cars and luxurious automobiles, and I feel that, and I respect that, and I'm with that. I'm like, let me get a nice little car, nice little watch, nice little suit. Then you talk about McDonald's. Like, it's apples and oranges. I don't see what you're talking about. I actually would agree with Emmanuel, but I think, Emmanuel, you're proving my point that Baker actually is undervalued. Or a better way to say it is this. The value that people place on him is high. It's very, very high. And so people in the Cleveland organization, from management up and from players, everyone is high on Baker. And so we're having a conversation about, well, you don't care. And, you were in Cleveland, Emmanuel. You know the importance of winning in Cleveland. You know the fan base. You understand it. People love Baker Mayfield. And so I don't think there's a conversation of he should be viewed in more importance. We love him. Everybody loves him. Everybody's high.
Not Bucky.
You're high on him. Everybody in Cleveland's high on him. And a lot of people in media are high on him. And also Andrew Berry, the people who sign his checks, the ones that cash in August and September, they're high on him as well. So Baker Mayfield's value is perfectly where it needs to be.
Until Bucky Brooks puts some respect on Baker Mayfield's name, I have to continue to fight for Baker. Now, Bucky, I'm going to drop you this full screen just to put some things in context, try to open up your eyes. You do realize that from week 12 on, Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes